Well, hi guys, Sunday night again. In fact, Easter Sunday night, so happy Easter to all, and hopefully this finally means the start of spring. Tried to put on the golf clothes and hasten things along, but up here in Connecticut, the courses are just barely opening up, and in terms of recreation management, this winter has really hurt the golf industry and put some people behind by about a week or two, even in their opening. And that goes to the sport business too. It's a consideration. Weather. Not too many businesses have to worry about the weather the way athletics and recreation and sport does. So let's see what happens. Okay, moving as we usually do with a review of what we did last week and where we're going and what I'd like you to be concentrating on this week. I think last week was probably a little bit more fun for most people. And we talk about that concept of competitive balance. What does it mean? How does that affect things in the business sense, in the economic sense with sports? And I think the discussion board, a lot of people hit an awful lot of issues that I hoped you would come in and mention. People mentioned the balance. It seemed as though on balance, the idea of competitive balance was accepted as being a good thing for sport, that if one team dominated, even though there is usually that one team everybody loves to hate, maybe that one historic team that seems to have had a record of success over the years. Balance is a good thing, that it keeps everybody interested, puts fans in the seats, it sells merchandise, it builds the sport, it builds interest, it even builds grassroots interest in the sport. And I think a lot of people hit many of the mechanisms used by sports leagues in particular and rule-making bodies in order to achieve that balance. We talked about salary caps, and you saw that there are different varieties of salary cap. The NBA has a soft cap, the NFL the hard cap. Major League Baseball doesn't have a cap. Could somebody please explain the NHL cap to me? I don't really get it. There are a lot of things like that. There's even talk in Europe and in the Premier League in England in soccer putting in a salary cap because of a lot of these competitive balance issues and the economics run amok issues. So that's been one solution. We've seen issues of luxury taxes being used for teams that exceed the salary cap. Several of you mentioned revenue sharing. So these are all tools that sports, and by sports I mean leagues and governing bodies, have used to try to maintain the balance, the integrity of the sport, and the competitive nature of the product as it goes on the field or on the court, so that people are entertained, are willing to come back, are willing to spend their money. So great job, really entertaining to read everything, and hopefully it was a lot more fun, and a little bit more of a fun way to start looking at economic issues. Now, this week we're going to do things a little differently. As I mentioned, I don't do my midterm exam after week 4. We do it in week 5. So as you're going to see this week, there is no discussion board. Your job this week is to work on the midterm. And the midterm, we actually are right about at the chronological point of where this question might come up. And what I've tried to do is create a question for you where it's timely in the sense of, like I said, chronologically, it's a basketball-related question. We're looking at the situation you would have if you were an NBA owner. And the scenario I created, I actually wrote this question a couple years ago, was that you're kind of a marginal NBA team. We talk about competitive balance, where are you in the standings? You're in probably 9th place. And there's about 10 games to go in the season. Well, as of tonight, there's about 9 games to go in the regular season for most teams. And where are we sitting? Well, there is one team that's actually about exactly in the position that we're talking about. And that's the Utah Jazz. I think they're sitting just in 9th place, and they're about even with the Lakers for that last spot. In the East, it's not quite as dramatic because there's a couple of teams who just might be able to push for the playoffs, but it would take a pretty good win streak over the last 9 or 10 games to do it. My hypothetical NBA team that you're going to be advising, that you're going to be working with, is in a position where they could make the playoffs with a significant push here at the end of the season. To do that, you've really got to go all out, try to win as desperately as hard as you can, try to win, and hope you make the playoffs. Now, you're the owner. You've got ultimate control. You could conceivably get to your coach and say, hey, look, just pull the plug. Let's not make the playoffs. Let's go for that lottery pick. Let's look and see if we can use the reverse order draft to its best possible way. Let's not worry about this year. Let's worry about the future. On the other hand, if you get a few playoff games, you get some added revenue, you get some added exposure. Sure, you're going to be going up against if you're in the East, you're going to be going up against the Heat. But what will that do for you? So here's your assignment. The assignment is basically that. You are that marginal team. You're the Jazz. Okay, you're whoever's in ninth place in the Eastern Conference. What do? Do you go after that last playoff spot? Or do you tell the coach to kind of phone it in and rest the regulars and play the rookies? Just go out there and mail it in and see what we can do. Let me deal with David Stern if he doesn't think we're being competitive. And we'll take care of the consequences because this is going to help us in the future. What I would like you to do, and I think the instructions say in a well-reasoned, well-thought-out, and well-documented essay of indeterminate length, take whatever you need to make your point. And in that essay, what would you do? What are the economic and business reasons for making the decision you choose to make? The playoff push or the push for the lottery? Which one, which route do you go? How do you get there? Okay? Now, we had a really neat experience where a guy who actually took this class about this time last year was able to, through a lucky accident, but also through some family friends, actually sit next to a gentleman named Ted Leonsis, who is the majority owner of both the Washington Wizards of the NBA and the Washington Capitals of the NHL. And this student was able to ask this very question to Mr. Leonsis, who immediately told him, and I'm kind of proud of this, wow, that's a really good question. Very appropriate. And so as long as he thinks it's a good question, I'm going to continue to use it. I will let you in on a little secret next week that Mr. Leonsis actually said his answer would be different for each one of the two teams that he owns, which I found to be a very interesting point, but I can certainly understand why he said he would take one position on one and one position on the other. And to be very honest with you also, when I originally wrote the question a couple of years ago, it was kind of the Washington Wizards were sort of my model franchise that I envisioned when I wrote the question. I didn't really think of the couple of teams that are also in that position, like the Dallas Mavericks. Didn't really think of them, but they're in that position this year. They'd be somebody you might want to consider. So consider it and tell me what the conditions are. And in fact, why don't you use the circumstances of this year's upcoming draft? Because I know the one thing I should probably give as a hint, clearly that could make a decision to go for the draft or go for the playoff spot if there was a clear number one or a very deep draft that would fall to you even if you didn't win the draft lottery. That could affect your decision. Let's say if there was a shallow draft that wasn't that stocked with talent. So that's what I want you to concentrate on this week, okay? But also, while you're doing that, don't neglect the reading. Don't neglect what other things I have in there. And because the reading this week, we're going to start looking at something very, very important and very big picture. And you're going to need it as you go into your final exam. And that's the market for teams and the impact of a franchise on a city or a locality. What does it mean to have a professional sports franchise in your area of economic influence? Why do cities want teams? Why do teams want to be in certain cities? What do people do to make teams interested in coming to them? Would you bid, so to speak, for a team? What's the market for teams? This also extends even to the world of college sports. What's the value of an athletic program to a university? Well, I think this last week we've seen the value of a basketball program to Florida Gulf Coast University, haven't we? Been quite dramatic, and it's going to have quite an impact on people. So those are the things we want to do. Work this week on the midterm. I skipped over it a couple of seconds ago too about the midterm. What I want you to do, I'll tell you, there's a reason why I never specify paper lengths, because if I tell people how long the paper has to be, that's what I'll get. If I say 5 pages, you know I'm going to get 4.72 pages of text, of which 3.5 will be junk, and the rest will be what you really want to say. No, I want it all to be substantial. I want it all to be substantive. So no specified page length, but if it comes in at a page or a few paragraphs, you're not really trying. Let's put it that way. If it comes in at 10 pages, you're probably trying to snow job me. Okay, those are my practical, real-world guidelines for doing this. So really, really consider all the issues that you have to take into account to answer the question. I think you're going to have fun with it. I think you'll find it timely. I think you'll find it reviews a lot of the concepts we've been dealing with, and it's going to set you up for the last 4 weeks of the course as we go ahead and actually apply more of this learning. So once again, great job. I hope you're having as much fun with this course as I am, and that you're getting a different perspective on the world of sport, that it means something to you, and I think there's some things that are going to help you in your sport management endeavors going in the future. Okay? So any questions, please contact me, and thank you very much. Once again, happy Easter.